Hello, listeners. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mike Vardy, who is considered to be one of the top thought leaders in the personal productivity and time management industries. His work has been featured in Lifehacker, Fast Company, Huffington Post, Inc., and Forbes. He's also a renowned author and international speaker and has taught productivity practices on popular education platforms such as Skillshare and LinkedIn Learning. I had a blast talking to Mike. I didn't have enough time to talk to the time expert, which is hilarious to think about. But I hope you glean some special tricks, some strategies, and just some greater awareness on how to deal with time. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Welcome to the Live for Yourself Revolution, where our mission is to highlight stories of intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs who are truly living for themselves. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, leadership and career coach focused on guiding you toward a career and life you can love. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. So, Mike, I don't know if you personally know this, but we recently rebranded the podcast from the Live for Yourself Revolution to Live Fearlessly. And of course, we have the executive podcast for executives as well. But when I see the productivity when I see that name, when I see time management strategist, I go, oh, Mike's probably got this down. He created a life where he can live fearlessly and for himself. But then at the same time, wait a second, but could it be that he's trying to fit too much in and doing too many things and trying to strategize and structure life? What is your perspective on living for yourself in regards to time?
So I'm a big believer in that time cannot be managed itself. Things that live within time can be managed. But I think for me, over the years, the shift has been don't manage time, manage your relationship with time. And that leads to the living fearlessly, living on your own terms, having more meaning and purpose and intentionality. Because the things that live inside of time, like attention, energy, awareness, perspective, all of those things live inside of time. And if we can focus on those things, because time is so big, it's so amorphous, and it's so dynamic, and it's something we don't have any control over. It moves on whether we wanted to or not. So in essence, it's interesting over the years as I've studied this and spent time in the space, there's a few things I've learned. Number one, I've tried many times, mostly to my own peril, to bend to the point of breaking my own frameworks that I've developed, that I teach people. It's almost like I try to be my own guinea pig and see how far it goes. And one of the things that I do that kind of leads to that is sometimes I overcommit. Sometimes I take on too much just to see how far I can push it. The problem is that no framework, no system, none of that will help you if you're overwhelmed, right? Because then there's emotion that gets involved, and emotional responses can wreak havoc with your ability to actually deliver quality outputs and even a quantity of outputs that you want to. So that's something that I've spent more time on recently, is just trying to get better at not going, look, I don't need to bend or break this thing. Trying to understand and convey to others that we're human. There's only so much that we can do in a day, so we should be doing what matters. And if we have a lot of things on our plate, how do we break them down into manageable pieces so that we can fit them within the time we have and in a way that we can gravitate towards those things instead of, kind of running away from them, screaming, or at least resisting them. So that's an area that I've really been kind of focusing on. The term productivity drives me nuts now because it's so focused on activity and quantity, whereas productiveness, which was, kind of the predecessor to productivity back before the Industrial Revolution, that was a state of being productive. It did not forsake quality for quantity. And I feel that because once you're in a state, that ness, right? Happiness, kindness, once you're in that state, that's where flow happens. That's where less friction shows up. So I've really been leaning into that a lot more. And the only way I can lean into that properly is to kind of simplify things and radically remove things, not just from my personal life, but from my professional life, to make it easier, not just for me to handle, but for those that keep up with my work to handle as well. I don't want to overwhelm them either. So, I think that the lessons learned, they say we teach what we need to learn the most. I'm still continuing to do that. I've just got 15 years under my belt, so I'm probably at a level of I'm probably at the advanced level of being taught stuff now, and I'm diving into some of the deeper water as opposed to just, like, hey, maybe we should put verbs in front of our to-dos. That's like the easier, earlier stuff. So that's kind of where I feel I'm at right now in this journey.
Wow, there's so much there. You've like amorphized time, and all of a sudden I started visualizing this like moving creature of thoughts and feelings and beliefs and stress and all the things. And then the comparison of productivity to productive, like it kind of like blew my mind for a second. I was like, wait, hold on a second. Those are very different in terms of,
Mm,
I think, how they've been portrayed
yeah.
right now in terms of society. Does time like are we trying to be more productive in the same amount of time, or are we kind of how are we perceiving time overall? And then I would actually love to even learn a little bit more about this idea of breaking something that, because like even for myself, I take a look at my life and I feel like I've come to a point where things are just really good, and I'm like, well, that's not like helpful because I work with people that things are not good for, and I'm like, I need to experience what it's not like things that aren't good so I can feel more like in touch with people. So I totally kind of resonate with this idea of I need to break some things and see what it's like, because I do feel like it puts you in the perspective of maybe some of the people that you're helping. And so how do you at level 15 of where you're at in terms of life and mastery of this topic, how do you understand like what people are actually going through on the day to day at like level 1, 2, and 3? um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's actually
think
my question.
no, 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 and that's good because I think what happens is again, once you've kind of laid the groundwork and have the experience, that's what you can look back to. So you've got wisdom on your side of it, right? Like I can remember when my days were full because someone else, I went to a job that was at a corporation that said you're working from this time to this time, and even though I could get all the work done in a shorter period of time, uh the peril that would happen there is I would get all the work done in a shorter period of time. And it's not like they said, okay, you can go home now. It was like, okay, well, here's more work. And that started for me back when I was in school, right? When I was in grade 3, I would finish my schoolwork early. And instead of being able to play, they'd give me more assignments. And then all of a sudden I see all the other kids who were just did finish doing the regular work. They finished it. Now they're getting to do what they want, but I wanted to finish the extra. So now all of a sudden I'm saying, well, wait a minute, well, how is this fair? So I think that a lot of it, when you're dealing with people who are just exploring this, in what I think is the best way to illustrate that is they know what a to-do list is, but they're so used to working it sequentially, or they know what their calendar is, but maybe they're putting the wrong things on the calendar. Like maybe they're putting deadlines on the calendar, which in not in every case serves whatever the deadline is for, because the closer the deadline gets, the quality and the effort that you would have to put in, more so the quality, the output can be affected because you're truncated with the amount of time that you've got. So I think that those areas are not they're not hard for me to be able to relate to people, mainly because I've been in those spaces. But to your point about like, what about now? What about the people that have been doing it? I listen. I listen a lot to the people that are in my community that have said, hey, I'm going to be retiring in a couple of years. And I want to make sure that when I'm retired, that, now I'm getting all this time back. What do I do with it? And that's when you kind of have to clean slate it in a lot of cases for people, because they're literally transitioning from having what they feel is no agency to nothing but, which means that, if you have all that, what do you do with it? Right. Well, still you should use your time purposefully. And when I say use your time, like, again, have that continued partnership with time so that the rest of your days, once you're no longer working, or once you've shifted into, say, an entrepreneurial slant instead of working for, like a 9 to 5 or something like that, that's, I think, where I thrive more now and I live more now, because the other thing, I've almost got like an wouldn't say an answer, but I've got a template to work from. So to circle back to the original question of, like when I originally said, like I try to apply pressure to the time crafting framework that I teach, so that way I can see, how far I can bend it before it breaks. I think the way that I should do that, and I'm getting better at doing it, is bit by bit. Like I'll choose one area to break as opposed or bend instead of trying to do multiple things to bend it, right? So I'm only looking at one possible fault as opposed to like trying to, plug up 4 or 5 of them. I think that's kind of where I go, but a lot of it just comes back down to, and I mean, this as a coach, to listening. The typical like, well, what else? Tell me what else, and digging deeper into that, because when I'm in that situation, not only am I doing what I can to help them and hopefully helping them, but I'm learning from them along the way. And I think that one of the risks that people have when they've been spending so much time in an area is they lose sight of beginner's mind. And I noticed that when I was writing my book, that came across many times with my editor, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what this means? Of course you should know what this means. But I can't make those assumptions. So by getting better at listening and getting better at kind of digging in, now I'm able to kind of recognize, oh, when I called this mode-based work, attention paths makes more sense to everyone, like in terms of how you should maybe look at your to-do list, one of the lenses you can use. Or, oh, you're retired, but you don't want to give everything up. Oh, I have a friend that called it bonsai retirement. Let me see if I can incorporate that into the mix. And that's where the creative and writing aspect come into play. But I think that allows me to dig into those and avoid getting too comfortable and too confident where I'm at. And I think that when you're in a good place, you may be waiting for the other shoe to drop, or you get too, like, the line between comfort and complacency is so tight, right? Like it can be. And it's in a variety of areas. So I try to keep myself kind of, I wouldn't say at a level of tension, but I'm always trying to say, like, am I getting too comfortable? If I am, then I need to mix things up a bit so that I don't get complacent. Because when complacency shows up, and I have been complacent, we all have, that's when things start to fall apart, and it's very tricky to pull them all back together as those dominoes start to fall.
Hmm. Okay, I imagine there's a variety of types of people that come to you. I mean, we all have different like relationships with time. I think that I'm limiting my focus right now, yet I have a list of probably 35 people on a marker board, a workshop I'm preparing for. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I have to do rehab and stretch every day, a book coming out and promotion, and then a variety of my task lists for that I want to do each day, like in front of me. And I'm like, oh, I'm limiting my focus. And I'm like, wait a second, hold on. It's like 9 o'clock at night and I'm still working. And yet I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on time, yet at times, as we were talking about prior to even the show, about how I try to protect my time and block it and have things in the morning, things in the evening, things during the day. Everyone has a different relationship with time and different things they're trying to accomplish. What is something that generally like everybody should do or needs to do when it comes to time crafting or time management?
I think there's a couple of things. Number one, you have to get really good at understanding that getting things out of your head and in front of you, whether it's on paper or in digital form, is one of the most freeing things you can do for your mind. And it's one of the things that can help you elevate your productiveness, and again, keep that relationship with time growing and fostering that relationship. Because, and there's clues, by the way, to that. There are clues. Like if you're sitting there and something comes to mind, or you're in the middle of something, that's more likely, and something comes to mind that is completely unrelated to what you're doing, instead of, well, I don't have time to think about that right now, or I don't have time to deal with that right now. That's not your brain saying deal with this right now. It's something has emerged and you need to get it out of your head so that you can properly assess it later. But because we live in a world of just like instant gratification and let's do things straight away, when these thoughts come to mind, when these ideas, tasks, whatever they are that come into our brains, we go, well, we can't do that right now. Like, that expectation is a fallacy. Like, no one's saying that has to happen right now, but because of just the way that societally we've been wired, oh, well, I can't do that right now, so I'll just wait. And then the problem with waiting is, what if that idea goes away? What if that thought goes away? So getting that practice, and again, most of these things are practices, like the practice of capturing, with a verb in front of it. So that way your brain isn't confused when you look at it. Because if you're looking at, like, oh, we're almost out of milk, and you just write down milk on a random sticky note, it's likely you'll know that that means buy milk, right? But what if you do that for a phone number? What if you do that for a person named Bill? And like call Bill about whatever. Like you need to be more as detailed as you can, but without breaking your flow as much as possible. That's number one. The other, which is actually kind of interesting because they almost seem opposite, is journaling. Like I can't tell you how many times people have said, like, I've tried the journaling and I just am not doing it right. There's no right or wrong way to journal. Journaling is all about like getting, first off, there again, I can tell you what I believe journaling's about, but for everyone else, it's going to be different. Like some people, like they will journal in, what did I do today? And they'll list all the things they did. That's fine, but the to-do list will tell you that too. Even the calendar will tell you like what you've had going on today. But the to-do list tells the story. It's got the nuance inside of it. Same thing with when you capture, there's nuance that you will be able to, tap into if you build a proper capturing habit, getting things out of your head and in front of you, again, either digitally or in analog form, and having a process to follow. But both of those things are practices. Like journaling is a practice. You're never going to win at journaling. You're never going to be able to check it off and say, hey, guess what? I never have to journal again. Same thing with the only time that you won't have to journal or capture again is when you're no longer living. Like literally, that's when that ends. And that's when your relationship with time has come to an end. So I think those two things, if you just start to do those with more consistency and in a way that you can sustain, then those two practices in and of themselves will help you become more productive, because number one, you're course correcting and checking in with yourself with the journaling aspect and cultivating awareness and perspective. And, is this thing really worth doing? Like that story is there, but the capture component saying like, here are the things that are coming to mind. What do I do with these things? I think getting that down is kind of like, those are like almost like the keystone bookends of any good time management, I'm doing air quotes here, or productivity framework. But realistically, once those are there, then you can do things like I'm going to time block, or I'm going to work contextually, or even use other elements of time crafting like theming your time or using attention paths to help you along the way. But I think those two universally, those two practices are so key and so fundamental, and they're not hard to do. I'm not going to say they're simple, but because they don't take a lot of time. But if you don't embrace them and have a way to do them in a sustainable manner, then that's where things can start to fall apart. Believe me, once you pick up these practices and you start doing them regularly, and then let's say you take a break from them, you notice. Like I notice when I don't journal for 2 weeks, and you know what that is? And it's happened. It happened not too long ago. And I'm like, what was going on over those 2 weeks? I have no idea what was going on, but it must have been, there must have been something, because otherwise I wouldn't have missed those. So you kind of, once you start doing those practices and doing them in a way that works for you, it's very noticeable when you stop. So I think that's where, honestly, if people started there, everything else, I wouldn't say if it would fall into place, but everything else makes more sense.
I've noticed that when I don't do the thing for one day turns into a week, and a week turns into a month,
Yep.
and it's like you lose awareness of it completely. So highly, yes, recommend if you can do something daily, do it and make sure that it's easy. And like for me personally, when I think about how I keep things together, it's I've built an environment that is pretty niche. Like I have my business,
Mm-hmm.
I have like a very focused. And so I'm not having to keep track of 20 different things. I'm keeping track of 20 related things, and that's been really helpful for me. And the biggest game changer, because I've tried the Trello and the spreadsheets and all that stuff, and I know people swear by like whatever OneNote or whatever they're using. It's like just a Google task list because everything is related and I just need to get it out of my head. I just put it there and forget about it. And people probably think I'm crazy too because I have like 3 different notebooks around the house. And sometimes they just are lists of the same things, but because I need to get
Yep.
them out of my head. And it's so helpful. I love that you said that, and also making it specific because I can't tell you how often I've gone to that task list and been like, "What was I thinking? Who is this person? What do I need them for?"
Well, and the other thing really quickly is that if you're writing, and I've done that too, like multiple instances of the same thing, either digital or an analog, because I have the same. I have notebooks like in different areas of my house and stuff like that. And I use Todoist for my personal task manager because I do have some shared tasks, and a ClickUp is what I use for my business because I'm dealing with multiple contractors. So when you have those machinations going on, then sometimes going into a more robust digital project management or task management tool would be ideal. But back to the idea of redundancy, if something is coming out of your head 3 times in 3 different notebooks, it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, there's a message there. And the message isn't just I need to do this thing. It's I've written it down 3 times. Clearly this is important. Like, clearly there's something going on in my head if it's trying to escape, and it's found its way out like 3 different ways. So like those clues, like, people don't look at those. They don't look at the, and I don't think it's because they're not capable of it. I think the world is moving at such a pace, and we feel like, oh, I've got all these things to do, that they miss out on these nuance laden clues. Like, well, you wrote that thing down 3 times. Maybe I need to like actually prioritize it, or maybe I need to like really dig in and break things down with this thing, or maybe I need to just figure out what of all these things matters. Do these things matter? Do they not matter? Like this assessment can only happen when you are getting things out of your head and in front of you, at least an honest assessment.
Yeah. And any quick tips on journaling? Because sometimes I open up that notebook and I start writing, and it is just my to-do list, and it's not like I've been helpful. Like, what's been helpful is sometimes question prompts and such. But what is your go-to?
My go-to is I look at my phone and see what photos I took for the day, because I'm taking lots of photos, right? Like, I mean, we have a camera with us. If you have a smartphone, you have a camera with you consistently. So I will start there if I'm stuck. Once you've got the habit going, like I said, it's very, like, I mean, it almost becomes self-sustaining in that I don't always need an image. But sometimes, I mean, I've gotten to the habit of using it as like a springboard. So I'll give you an example. Today, I have a photo of my son graduating middle school. Like, that's the photo for today. I mean, we're not even, as we're recording this, I'm not even really 2/3 through the day. And I already know that when I write my journal, and journaling for me, I do it at the end of the night. I'll give you the other, this is a second tip, but when I journal, it's at the end of the day. It's kind of closing out the day, like the evening examination that the Stoics would do. So if you're using a digital journaling tool, it makes it even easier. Like, Apple's got the journaling app, which gives you everything there. So if you're trying to get started with it, that could be a place to start. But there's other tools like Reflection for multiple platforms. There's Day One for iPhone. There's Journey for Android. There's a lot of different journaling tools. But if you're doing a handwritten journal, you could still just open up your phone and go, did I take any photos today? Oh, that's what I did. Or look at the calendar, because the calendar should tell you kind of the directory of your days, but it's not going to give you the details like a to-do list would. So for example, if I did not have the middle school graduation for my son today, and let's say I was looking at the calendar, I'd say, had a conversation with Ben today, and it was a really interesting one, because the questions he was asking are not normally questions I get. And my physio for my right shoulder is going well, and you got to keep up with those exercises to make sure that you don't get frozen shoulder. Like, those kind of things, they just lend themselves to it. Another tip would be to dictate it. Use the dictation engine if that's what you want to do. You could audio record it too, but I think there's a bit more friction with that. Some people like to actually just do an audio version of their journal. Problem there, unless you're using Apple's journaling app, is that when you go back to review, you've got an extra step. You've got to sit and listen to it as opposed to like reading it. And another tip, which I already alluded to, was tether it to a routine. So tether journaling to other routines that you have. So if you have a morning, like if you've got a morning routine, you could tether journaling to that routine, right? Like, make that another task that gets added onto that morning routine. And you don't need a lot of time to journal. I mean, there's a journaling app and a journaling, like, actual journal called the 5-minute journal. 5 minutes is not a lot of time either to put at the beginning of your day or the end of your day, whatever your routine is, bedtime or morning routine. And for those that say, well, I don't have time to journal, I don't have all these other things. Hey, listen, if you're spending time on any social media and you're sharing what's going on there, you're already journaling. You're just journaling for the whole world. And there's a good chance that what you are sharing on those apps is not purely going to be helpful for you in the long run. A lot of it is optics, right? A lot of it is sharing what you feel like sharing to present the story that you want to share for the world. But the story you keep for yourself is different. There's stuff in my journal that at this point, I don't want there's members of my family that if they want to read it after I'm gone, they'll probably see some things in there like, wow, Mike really didn't like me that day, or oh wow, Mike loved me that day. Like there's stuff that goes in there that I'm not afraid of anyone getting into, and if they do, well, then that's that. I mean, I don't see that happening, but those are kind of the things I would consider is using photos, tethering it to a routine, either morning or evening, and then using kind of putting yourself in a position where you could use the calendar if you need to just
Hmm.
grease the wheel and get that flywheel going for journaling.
I was furiously writing down notes, but I can just listen to this again of all the awesome tools that you actually recommended. So thank you for that. Uh, Priceless, honestly, priceless. Okay, this is all great. You're an incredible masterful expert on this field. And what's the term you like to use? Is it time crafting? Is it productivity, productivityist? What do you say?
So this is where, yeah, again, speaking of simplification. So um, time crafting is the method that I teach. It's the framework. Productivityist, which as of we're as we're recording this, I'm literally a week away from my 50th birthday. So I'm at a point now where I'm transitioning. I wouldn't say transitioning away from the productivityist because people still know me as that. And really, what the origins of that term was I was enthusiastic about productivity. I dove into it, I got into it, and then I became a specialist. So I learned how to use certain tools and certain methods. And then I became a strategist, which means I was sharing, like, here's how you here's how you use my tools, and so on and so forth. So the ist kept coming up. So we just coined the term productivityist, and it kind of stuck. It's hard to say, hard to spell, but it's stuck. And so that's where we've started. But now that I've spent, like I said, the better part of 15 years in and around that space of being known as the productivityist, which I think really has only been the last decade being known as the productivityist, I've never said that there's only one. Like anybody could be a productivityist if you are you want to improve the way that try to be productive. Uh, that would put you in line to be a quote productivityist. But now where I'm at is I love the term productiveness over productivity, just simply for the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's a state as opposed to an activity of producing. So the state of being productive as opposed to the activity of producing. To me, it's a more holistic way of looking at it, for lack of a better term. But as we shift into my like post 50 years, which are coming up, and actually, interestingly, because it's a leap year, the end of the first half of 2024 ends on July 2nd, and the first day of the second half is July 3rd, which is my birthday. So I'm kind of mirroring all of this to say, like, once I'm just really leaning into Mike Vardy and MikeVardy.com, which is where you can go to learn more about all my stuff, is I want to explore things deeper, more philosophically, maybe. Yes, I still know all the apps and I have my frameworks, but there's so much nuance there, and the nuance is the middle, right? Like when you think about, there's this great quote that I believe the director of the Anthony Bourdain documentary Roadrunner said, is he was quoted in an article saying that Anthony loved to run and live in the gray. And what they meant by that was, there's the black and the white, there's the left and the right, there's polar opposites, right? But there's so much more in the middle, right? Like the world is shades of gray, right? Which is nuance. And because nothing is absolute on either side. And I feel like when I've talked to people about productivity in the past, I remember somebody saying to me on a webinar, I said, productivity is the active link between intention and attention. And they're like, no, it's efficiency and effectiveness. They put in the chat. I'm like, it's about being efficient and effective. I'm like, no, those are byproducts of being productive. Like you can't, like productivity isn't about being efficient and effective. It's if you're productive, you're going to be more efficient and effective. So what being productive is, or productivity, if you want to define it that way, but I'll go with being productive, is what is your intention and how are you going to pay attention to that intention? Because you can have all the intentions in the world, but if you're not giving those intentions any attention, then those intentions are really, they're powerless, right? Conversely, and I think this is the problem most people run into, is you could have all the attention in the world, but if you don't have any intention for that attention, then what you're doing is directionless. It's aimless. And so you end up going, how the heck did I get here? What happened to the day? What happened to the week? What happened to the month? But no one can tell me that every week, every day, every single, is the same. We have to kind of cultivate and engineer certainty. And that's the kind of stuff I want to dig into more and more. Like what I want to live, I want to run and live in the gray, I guess, ultimately. So that's kind of where I've been heading over the past several years, which is probably why it's taken me a while to get books out. And, kind of there's been some self-exploration and reflection. And now as I kind of emerge from that, it feels like I already know what I want to do after the book comes out. And I already know what I want to do after the next book after that comes out. Like I've got a sense of that. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily all going to be explored as how I feel they will be, but I know what what I need and I want to do to have a fulfilling and meaningful relationship with time and with my audience. And that's kind of the direction I'm heading. And I know I'm kind of, it's a big, broad answer that may only touch on what you were asking, but I feel like Productivityist is prologue. And Mike Vardy learned a lot from that and will continue to carry that forward. But there's so much more on the other side that I want to explore. Yeah. And I can take everything I've gained to this point and bring it with me in a way that makes sense, not just for me, but for those that I'm trying to have an impact with and on.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't even touched your career journey and your story yet. So listeners, make sure that you follow Mike's journey and story, reach out, find him, do some of your own research. And happy almost birthday and happy birthday, depending on when you, I guess maybe if you listen to this again, but what an exciting time. And what I'm hearing throughout all this is time doesn't control you. You're intentional around your time. And there's almost underneath this all some self-trust that when I think about the clients I've worked with that feel like they don't have enough time, it's generally because they don't trust that they're going to be okay. And they're allowing other pressures, other ideals, other people's needs to have control over it. And so it's really beautiful to hear that within how you're sharing kind of your own story and your own tactics and philosophies and strategies and interests.
Well, I will say really quickly that I think a lot of us, there's three realms of productivity. I talk about this in the book, The Productivity Diet. There's reckless productivity, ruthless productivity, and reasoned productivity. And reasoned productivity is where we kind of want to spend more time. And it's also the biggest kind of, there's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of tolerance as to what lives in there. But unfortunately, and when someone says, I don't feel like I have enough time, they're leaning too far into the emotional aspect of it, which is totally fine because we're human. And that's what, so that puts you in kind of this reckless productivity area where you're kind of just throwing darts at a dartboard and throwing spaghetti at the wall and just trying to check off as many boxes as possible with as much a rhyme and reason as you can muster. But there's something there that's kind of keeping you from being a little bit more reasoned about your approach. And that's that. So the reckless stuff kind of can lead to, again, overwhelm, these feelings of lack of accomplishment. Burnout can happen on that front. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is if you're too logical. Well, today is this, and I should be doing this, and this is the main project, and so you get very myopic and very tunnel vision. That's ruthless productivity. If you're too logical about it, you're removing the human component. Which, by the way, we should be able to tap into that with things like generative AI and other areas. But as the humans behind the wheel, there's still humans there. So if you try to be too ruthless, then not only do you can run the risk of burnout in a completely different way, but other things will fall through the cracks. It's like the story Hey Kookaburra from David Sedaris, or Randy Zuckerberg talking about the burners that you have on the stove or whatever, that you can only choose 3 or 4 things. Like if you go too far in the ruthless direction, then things will start falling through the cracks because you've got tunnel vision. So you really want to have this reasoned approach. And that's where understanding that there's so much nuance, like not every Monday is going to be the same, but you could definitely try to say, hey, well, Monday, it's going to be the day where I focus largely on administrative tasks. And that's what you do. And then So you feel like when the day is done, even if you didn't feel like you got a ton of stuff done, if you focused your overarching concentrated focus on administrative tasks, your brain goes, well, look, I followed what I said I was going to do and I did a good chunk of it. So it was a pretty productive day. So to me, when people are saying like, I don't feel like I was very productive, or I really try to bring them into the reasoned realm. And if people are like, I'm driven, I'm this, I'm that, but there's something missing, or I'm feeling like I'm overworking. We just try to pull them back into that reasoned realm. And if we can spend more time in the reasoned productivity realm, then I think you get the best of both quantity and quality. You get the best of both worlds. And that's kind of where I would hope. And hopefully, if you follow my work and keep up with what I'm doing, and when the book comes out, that you pick up the book and learn a bit more about it, then you'll be able to spend more time in that reasoned realm. Because there's nothing wrong with reasoned, like a reasoned amount of work, or using reason to help you figure out. Reasonable can have a negative connotation, which is why I didn't call it a reasonable level of productivity. But reason, we need to apply that more. And it's tricky because it's almost like it's the middle between logic and emotion.
Well, I was just talking about this with a bunch of friends. I was like, how much is enough friendship? How many times can I want to see everyone all the time. And I'm like, wait, I need to sleep. I need to do work. And there's always going to be more work to do, always going to be more friends I want to see, always going to be more books I want to read. And I need to, think about that a little bit more with a little bit more reason. So thank you, Mike, for your time. And how can our listeners follow you, find you?
Well, MikeVardy.com is the website. I am on X/Twitter as @MikeVardy. And then I think by the time this airs, I will probably have Instagram and Facebook shifted over to Mike Vardy, but you can always look me up at Productivityist as well on social, because there's a few banners there. So there's still that blending going on. But if you Google Mike Vardy, there's only one of us out there, other than, there's a filmmaker and then there's me. So you get to pick your poison there. But yeah, MikeVardy.com is pretty much where you'll find everything.
Awesome. And I will put that link in the notes. And so everybody put on your task list, follow, like, email, some sort of verb, and Mike Vardy. So thanks again for your time, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I had an absolute blast. Thanks for having me.
You've been part of the Live For Yourself revolution. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share with a friend and spread the good word. Until next time, keep on living for yourself.